You are listening to the Beyond the High Road podcast with Shelby Milford, episode number 11. Stay tuned. Welcome to Beyond the High Road, a podcast dedicated to healing your heart and life following the grief of alienation. I'm your host, Shelby Milford, a twice certified life coach specializing in post-traumatic growth. I'm also a target parent who felt like my identity in this world left me on the very same day that my sweet child did. After hitting my emotional bottom, I devoted the next 6 years to research and personal growth. Using proven concepts based heavily in neuroscience and psychology, I developed my own playbook for reintegrating with life and reframing my role as my daughter's mother in the midst of living apart from her. I went from feeling agonized, helpless, and directionless to feeling energized, confident, and most importantly, at peace. Today, I get to help other parents like you to do the same. If you're experiencing the effects of alienation and you're ready to heal, then this show is my love letter to you. Stay tuned. Hi guys, today I have this is a subject that I wanted to talk with you guys about since before I ever even started the show for a long time, but I kept shying away from it because I thought this is a sensitive subject for some people. And so I kept thinking I didn't want to scare anybody off, but then I thought that's like a bunch of people pleasing. I think that I would regret it if I didn't put it out there and then the one person that did need to hear it didn't hear it, you know? So for that reason and that pretty much reason alone, I've decided to go ahead and release this. Anyway, I hope you guys really enjoy it. What I'm about to share with you is probably one of the most liberating tools that I have ever. In fact, this is without a doubt the most liberating or empowering collection of concepts that I have ever learned in my entire life. If you don't love the relationship that you currently have with any habit, any addiction, anything that's holding you back from being the person you want to be, then you are not going to want to miss this and the next episode. Okay. If you haven't hit follow, please do. I would love that. And also, if you haven't already, if you would rate and review the show, that would be fantastic. It helps other parents like us to find us. We get more visibility with each one of your reviews. So thank you to those of you who have already reviewed. Noah, that was you. I saw yours from this last week too. What a beautiful, beautiful review. So thank you. Thank you so much. I really do gives me warm fuzzies and puts a smile on my face for literally like the rest of the week, actually, when I read one of those. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay. So let's get started. I don't know if I've shared with you guys who I help and my areas of expertise as of yet. One of them, of course, is I help other parents experiencing alienation to rebuild their lives and begin using their story to benefit them and to benefit others, right? So that's the one area. And then I also help parents who are struggling with any sort of addiction or habit that is holding them back from living life how they really want to. And I help them in I would say, very non-traditional way, like not 12-step wise, based in science and really, really works. And as you'll hear later, I've had plenty of experience in this area. And I would consider myself, maybe you might after this episode and subsequent episodes, I would consider myself an expert in the area. Okay. This method will help with really any behavior that is getting in the way of them living their life in the way that they want to. Okay. And let's be honest, we all have behaviors or coping mechanisms that we use in order to not do other areas of life, to not feel certain feelings, procrastinating. I call it buffering. When we buffer, we're using other things, other behaviors to avoid doing the thing that we really should or want to be doing. Okay. We will go quote unquote numb ourselves by doing something that isn't actually going to contribute to the end result that we want. Does that make sense? So for the purposes of this episode and really all future episodes, when I say alcohol, I'm just referring to my own experience. But let's say if your area is with like food, sugar, marijuana, or shopping, whatever it may be for you, gambling, porn, all addictions fall under this sort of umbrella, right? They all pretty much work in the same way in our brains, in our bodies, what happens, why with the reward system, why we become addicted. There's so many things that we can become addicted to, right? So when I say alcohol throughout this episode and actually any other episodes, just replace my wording for whatever it is that will help you to relate to it. Okay. Yeah. So those are the two kinds of people that I help. Sometimes they intermingle, and a client of mine will be an alienated parent and struggling with addiction, right? And sometimes not. So sometimes they sort of interweave and they, whatever, but sometimes they don't. But I know when it comes to addiction and when it comes to drinking and habits, this is one that I know that me as an alienated parent, the many of you out there, just from seeing it in the support group rooms, this is something that is a challenge for many of you out there. And it makes sense, right? Because if we're in abusive relationships, if we are dealing with any other sort of dysfunctional dynamic, the chances that we also grew up with a similar dynamic those chances are pretty good, right? And usually with those dynamics come exposure to new unhelpful habits, to drinking as a way to cope, to eating as a way to cope. Okay. So it's completely understandable that you would also have adopted whatever habit you learned. We use these behaviors because we aren't really taught how to feel as kids, right? Do you remember was one of the first few episodes that I did talking about emotions and that how we're taught like somebody else has the power to make us feel feelings? Number one, that's what we're taught as kids. And we're also taught that if we are sad or mad or any of the uncomfortable feelings, that we need to go and find something outside of us to fix it, right? Like, let's go get you an ice cream, honey. Don't be sad. Don't be mad. From a very young age, we are taught that having those feelings is like not the objective, and it's to be avoided at all costs, right? Avoided and fixed. So it makes complete perfect sense that you and I would find alcohol or any other habit as a source of relief, as a reprieve. And then on top of that, think about the marketing in today's world, right? I'm going to talk about the US, but I know that also like in Australia, it's the same way. In Europe, it's the same way. Lots of places, it's like this where we are taught like just have a beer and the worries of your day will go away, or you just need a little bit to take the edge off, right? It's in movies, it's in sitcoms, everywhere we look. You cannot go to, any social event most of the time. I'd say these days it is coming around where it is a little bit more normal to be the sober one in a crowd, right? It is a little bit more normalized, but for so long, for most of our lives, you would be the outcast if you weren't drinking at a barbecue or a party. You're not drinking? Why? Why are you drinking water? Do you have a problem? Like all of these social norms and the way that we've been conditioned. We are conditioned to drink. Really, honestly, if I'm talking about just drinking alone here, this is something that it's everywhere we look. You go to a restaurant, there are how many beers on tap? You order a wine with dinner. If not, it's considered brewed or something. There's all of these little rules that we've built into our everyday life, from maybe even like how you celebrate your own family. Oh, this is how we do it. We eat and we drink wine, right? And then, but it comes at you from advertising and from the way that we deal with our emotions on a deeper level. It's all over. So it makes so much sense that of course you would carry on with this behavior. Unfortunately, sometimes it becomes a habit, and it becomes a habit that doesn't do well for us. Some people, you see those people out there that can have one and then they stop and they're done. right? And then there's others, namely me, where for my whole entire life, I couldn't just have one. I thought that I couldn't. I thought that I was, in some way, I was different. I couldn't be a normal person. Well, I've come to find out differently as far as what goes on in the brain. And let me just say, as cliched as it is, knowledge is power. Learning about how the mind works, how addiction works, how the reward system that's set up in our body, in our brain works. For me, it was so liberating to find out that my brain was actually working how it was supposed to when I wanted a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth drink. This was actually something that I had conditioned myself to do. So I'll get into that later, but I just want to let you know, for anybody out there that maybe has some shame around their habit that has proven to not be so helpful for them now, but they seem to not be able to stop. Like, you feel like you can't stop. You try, and it just, every time you've tried all these different rules that you've put on yourself, like, okay, I'm going to drink when I'm with friends. Okay, I'm only going to have 2. I'm only going to drink on Saturdays, on every other Saturday. All the rules that you have right for yourself. And each time you end up breaking them, it's not because you're out of control. Okay. It's because you've conditioned yourself, like Pavlov's dogs, you've conditioned yourself to behave in this way. So I just want you to know, before I go any further into this episode, that there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. If this is you, and like I said, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol or drugs, any habit that is hindering you from being the best version of you, okay? It goes for all of them. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken and you're not a degenerate, okay? In the next episode, we're going to go into how to break the habit. In the rest of today's episode, we are going to discuss what happens in the brain, how an addiction is formed, and why it is. Specifically, we as alienated parents protect the habit like we do. And I'm going to get into that one first. This is an area where I think we really work hard to try to protect it, especially if it's one that is being used against us. And so there are a few reasons I've come up with as to why we do this. The first and most obvious reason is because we don't want it to affect our custody situation. So most likely in this area, the alienating parent has already been using it or is trying to use it to have leverage over you or over the target parent. It's been sort of held over your head as to why you are not safe around your children. And then the second reason you protect it is because the other parent does it just as much as you do, if not more. So you're like, well, they're doing it. So what's the difference here? Why do I have to be the one that quits? Right. And by the way, let me just, before I even finish these, I did all of these, like all of them. And I really, truly, I was invested in all of these thoughts, sentences, beliefs. Okay. The third one is that the habit isn't what's causing the problem. The alienation is what's causing the problem, right? Again, why should I have to change when this isn't what's causing it? Me going and letting off steam because of their efforts to alienate me. This is the way that I deal. Their efforts to alienate are what is harming my child or children, and what is harming me. I wouldn't drink so much if they wouldn't be practicing these strategies, right? I don't know if anybody can relate out there. I have a feeling some of you can. And then number 4 is, if you do address, or let me just not direct this towards you, but if a target parent does address it, they're admitting that they have a problem in the first place. Like, well, I'm not going to stop drinking now, because if I stop and I adhere or I succumb to whatever their demands are, then 1, I'm admitting I have a problem if I decide to do A, B, and C to quit the drinking or whatever. In doing that, we think that we're making their efforts to alienate justified, right? Like, if we admit that we have a problem, it'll shift the attention and be like, see, I had a reason to protect our kid. So we get all freaked out because they look at everything, and the courts look at everything as so black and white, and kind of forget a lot of the context that goes with all of it. So we think that if we admit it, that we're taking on all the blame. And also it affects the ego. So target parent is like sort of admitting defeat. And so that's a huge alarm system going off in your lower brain. Okay. And the fifth thing is that the target parent thinks that if they're honest with themselves about it, then it means it's like the point of no return. If you're honest with yourself about it and you admit that there might be something going on there, then there's no going back. Once you admit it, you're like, oh gosh, if I even go there, if I even look at it and identify it as what it is, then it's always going to haunt me. And then I'll never be able to drink or whatever it is, the habit is, and have fun anymore. Right. That's another one of the things. So I get every single one of these. Like I said, I did every single one of these. I think the biggest ones for me was well, they're doing it, right? And also, the reason I drink is because I need a reprieve from that. For me, it was a vicious cycle. Her father would ramp up alienation strategies. I would feel pressure. Because I felt pressure, I needed relief from the pressure. And my daughter would go to her father's. I would go out for a night of drinking. Okay. Lather, rinse, repeat. Right. It would just keep going like that. And the snowball became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until I couldn't really even manage it anymore. And then what was I doing? He was using my weakness as ammunition, and then I was providing him with more ammunition. That's how that went. That's where it all got messed up, is I was only helping his case because I was, in his eyes, oh, she's weak. She'll crumble, right? I only know that because he said that before. Otherwise, I usually don't like to assume what other people are thinking. But yeah, so I was just giving him exactly what he wanted. I wasn't dealing with the pressure well. And I thought the only way to deal with it was to drink, to escape it. But what I didn't realize is by quote unquote escaping it, I was only causing more little tornadoes, more little problems that I had to cover up or lie to. It was a big mess. It was like, oh, what a tangled web we weave. Because then it got to the point where he was able to use it against me in court. And so then I was constantly looking over my shoulder when I went to bars, and I was out drinking still, because I was like, he can't tell me what to do just because he had the money to pay the attorney that got the judge to believe all this stuff to begin with. Right. So it was like this big pissing contest. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was really cutting off my nose to spite my face, because my premise was, he's the one that's wrong. He's the one that's doing the alienation. He's the one that's causing all the damage in her and my daughter, and then in turn causing it in me. And that is why I'll go to drink. And if you take the drinking away from me, then what the fuck else do I have? Right? This is my only way that I know how to survive. If I don't have the drinks, if I don't have this as a reward, I have nothing. I don't know what to do. And then especially when she already went to her dad's, right? She was not even living with me anymore. Then I was like, well, life is miserable. At least with drinking, there is something good, right? That's how I saw it. It was like, this is, at least I can look forward to this. But let me just tell you, it took me years, again, I say this a lot, of banging my head up against a wall to realize that what I was doing was really just trying to cover something up with more of that thing. And when I really, truly, honestly looked at my situation, alcohol wasn't providing me with the fun or the reprieve that I thought it was. In fact, it kept creating more problems for me. It always did. And it was always like, and whether that was just like a hangover, or whether that was that I realize now is that the reason I was not so creative back then was because I didn't have the capacity in my brain, because I was always run down, right? From drinking, even if it was 2 drinks the night before, it was perpetually like I had the programming of addiction that was taking up my brain capacity, right? And my creativity, because at all times I was trying to protect this vice of mine, this habit of mine, right? And so I would work around things without even realizing I was doing it. But I was sort of making my life work around this habit so I could protect it, so I could keep that area like sacred, my reward time. Like I said, what I realized is this was not the case at all. I was actually creating so much more suffering for myself. And by continuing to hold on to this habit, I actually lost sight of what my initial and true goal was, right? Which was to mother my child. It always was. That was always my true goal. But when I drank, that drinking sort of buffered the rest of my life. Like I didn't, the drinking helped me to not look at where my fault was, where the problems were, so that I could assess and then act accordingly. It's literally like putting blinders on over your eyes and trying to operate that way and convincing yourself somehow that you do everything better with these blinders on. It's ridiculous to think about, but that's truly what we do when we use a habit like drinking or drugs or eating or whatever to get us through something, is that we're telling ourselves that we cannot do without it, that life is better, more bearable with this sort of security blanket in our lives. And so the thing is with that is if we have this security blanket, we're allowing our current conditions to remain as they are because we're dulling the discomfort, because we don't ever, as humans, unless we're forced into change, we don't like to do it. When you look at like when you tried to leave the narcissist in your life, right? Or the borderline in your life, you put it off and you put it off and you put it off until the pain gets so uncomfortable that you finally are like, okay, I have to leave now because it's so uncomfortable. It would be more uncomfortable to stay than to leave. It's the same thing here. And then after you leave, you were probably like, oh God, why didn't I do that so long ago? But you don't, because you have made life bearable in the meantime by using a habit, by drinking, by buffering your life in some way. That's why it's called buffering. It's like we're like in this holding pattern where we're just trying to make life more bearable as it is. I don't know about you, but if you think about that, for me, I was like, oh my God, like I'm staying in all of this pain so much longer because I'm numbing myself through this pain. As opposed to, if there's no numbing agents, then guess what? I'm going to get off my ass and get some stuff done. Somehow, some way, I will figure it out because one, I'll have the capability because I won't be impaired or just like dull, tired, the next day from all of it. I'm working on all cylinders. So when you take the numbing agent, food, drinking, whatever it is out of your life, where you take that out of the equation, then I promise you, you'll start to get busy real quick, fixing the areas of your life that needed to be attended to begin with. So let me give you a little backstory about me and my background as far as addictions, alcoholism, all of that stuff goes. Before I found this way of doing things, right, which is all based on science, which is amazing, I had an extensive amount of experience in the 12-step world. It began with my brother, who was addicted and then ended up, I think I mentioned before, that in his adult years, actually it wasn't 7 years ago, like I was saying before, it was more like 10. But anyway, he died of addiction or addiction-related circumstances. So I was introduced to the 12-step world as a teen because my theory is that my brother was always sort of in trouble and troublemaker, and he was into drugs and drinking and you name it. And so when it came to me, I was 4.5 years younger. My mom was super overly looking for any signs she could find. Well, I learned that I could get attention by telling my mom that I did what my brother did, because my brother sort of took up all the attention with his behavior when he was in high school and I was in middle school. So I figured, oh, this is how you get attention. So I would tell my mom that I was doing the same kinds of things that my brother was, and poof, immediately I got attention. It was great for me. I don't know if I knew what I was doing at the time, but anyway. So I was immediately swooped off, and my mom, I was in Alienation and later on AA and all of that. I made friends there and had a whole social group. I ended up centering my entire life around these friends that I had made from these 12-step groups. And what was so funny was at that point, I'd only drank like twice in my entire life. So like, it was just the whole thing was sort of a lot. But I do believe that nothing is a mistake. Clearly, years later, my background in this area has served me well. So many of the 12-step groups that you hear about and know about, I've been to. And as a kid, there was a few things that did not sit well with me when it came to the way that 12-step groups approached addiction. That's a whole nother podcast in its own. We can get into it later, but there were things even as a 16 and 17-year-old that just didn't sit right with me. Alcohol had always played this role in my life, even when it wasn't in my life. I didn't know that I ever wanted to drink it, but because it was always something that was either forbidden or my mom was something that I was never going to be able to do properly. The way that I learned, I would not do well with it. And so, of course, I was very curious about that. So, spoiler alert, fast forward a few years later, me being me, I needed to try it. I wanted to see what this was all about. And then when I did finally drink, it was like always on my mind, this I'm not supposed to be drinking. Why aren't I supposed to be drinking? What does this mean about me? This whole thing, right? But eventually I realized that it could be used as a tool, that I could use it to escape feelings, right? That I could use it to feel comfortable in a room, that I could use it to dance better. In fact, I even painted better. I was an artist, still am an artist, but I could get a painting done in half the amount of time when I was drinking. Right? I don't think that that could be the same thing today, but there was a time when, yeah, it like helped the creative juices flow. I was convinced for so long that alcohol just made me more of who I am. It helped me to relax, helped me to decompress after all of the stressful situations of the day. And then, of course, when alienation came around, when I broke up with my ex, when that whole thing went down, I used it to lessen the pain, to forget about the threats and bullying and all of the things. So I always used it as a tool. I tell you all of this, not because I'm trying to make myself sound like a professional drunkard. I tell you it because I want you to know that I do truly have experience with all sides, I think, of addiction. I have seen it firsthand. I've experienced it personally for myself, and I understand how it works. I also have tried the ways. I've gone to the 12-step groups. And granted, when I was attending those groups, I had not had much experience with drinking. But what the biggest issue I took with 12-step groups was right in step one is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. And to me, and this goes with Overeaters Anonymous and all of the Gamblers Anonymous, we admitted we were powerless. I just, even at that age, and this was before Google and before all the things, I wasn't buying that a substance, something in a bottle without a brain, a human brain, there was any capability of it being more powerful than my human brain. Like that just seemed ludicrous to me. And so I always sort of like scoffed at that, thinking that substance in the bottle has no capabilities. It can't jump out of the bottle and jump into my mouth. It can't do a little dance and talk to me. It can't do any of that stuff. What does do that stuff is the brain. The brain, which we have control over our executive functions. Our brain does that. So when we do have control over our brain, then we can control whatever is outside of us. Because that first step was suggesting that we would like lose all of our faculties and not be able to control picking it up and drinking. And that is not true. We always have a choice. Always. I don't care how far into addiction you are. There is always a choice. I just didn't understand that. There was a few other things. I actually wrote a couple blogs on this, and I'd have to go look and find them and try to post them to accompany this. That might be a big help. But with it, I attached, of course, all references and infographics and the whole nine. So, and I also have a course on this. So if you were interested in delving into this further, then send me a message and I have a course that's based all about this and gives you all of the back information that I have. But let's just say the reason I'm explaining my extensive experience with the 12-step programs, with my brother seeing addiction happen firsthand is because I want you to know that I'm not just making these claims and saying these things and, oh, you should just try doing it this way. No, I have had a lot of exposure to recovery and to addiction and to all the things. And I didn't even mention that my second husband, the one that I've talked about in previous ones, not my daughter's father. Well, I was with him through, I didn't realize this into the end, but his progressive, very troubling addiction to drugs. And then subsequently 2 stints through detoxes and rehabs. So I've been there, like I've seen it. And also, I have tried all these different ways to sort of normalize my drinking for myself, right? To make it fit into my life. Well, I tried all these ways, and then what had happened is my coach. So this is a funny story, but my coach, I heard her talk about this. She was talking about stopping over drinking. And this was, I don't know, years ago. When I started to hear what she had to say, I was so upset that I stopped listening to her, and I canceled my membership with her, all of it for like 6 months, because I was like, how dare she try to claim that you can do this, as like how irresponsible of her, that you can do this without using some sort of 12-step or rehab. I was genuinely concerned for other people's safety, and I was pissed, right? I was pissed at her. And then over that 6-month period where I completely shut her out, it was just like working in the background of my mind. I got a little curious about it, and I was like, wait a second, could it be? Like, how could this be possible? And so I started doing all this research on my own before I ever decided to come back with my tail between my legs and take this program of hers. So I started researching, and I gathered enough like evidence of my own. And then I thought, oh my gosh, this actually really could work. And so that's when I went back to her. And so then I got more information, and I took the certification. I was like, holy shit. And I applied the stats, and it works. It's amazing. So anyway, that's the story with that. Okay, so let me get back to where I was. I think I was talking about protecting it and not wanting to give it up. When it came to having that comfort, what I thought was a comfort, when it came to having that threatened, like that it was going to be taken away from me, it killed me. I didn't know what I was going to do. It instantly made me feel like the world was going to end, like my security was being threatened. I'm going to explain why that is here in a minute. But what I didn't realize, that I think it's so important to realize, is that this is a normal human brain response. If you have conditioned your brain with reinforcing a behavior, this is a normal response. Like your brain is actually working properly for you. If you also have the same freak out when you think about having to give up your vice, whether that's alcohol, whether that's smoking, that's another thing. I would closet smoke too. I was a fitness professional for 20 years, almost 20 years. And I would smoke like I would, like on the secret, like on the down low. And if I would get busted, oh God, it was the worst. But anyway, that right there, the kind of message that I was sending to myself though, was that I had to lie about who I was to everybody else besides me, that I was hiding something. Some part of me was not good for the rest of the world to see. You see how that is? And so we minimize it and make it so it's not like a big deal. And think about that. When you feel so shameful as to have to hide something from whomever, if it's from your children, or because you're worried that they're going to bring it back to your ex or whoever, if and when you're hiding something from somebody, you're also sending this powerful message to yourself that you are not good enough as you are. So if this sounds familiar to you, then stick around for the rest of this series, because I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to help you with the messaging that you're sending to yourself and why you feel you need the messaging. Not only that, but I'm going to explain to you why addictions are so difficult to break, and also why it's so completely normal that you feel the way you do, and that just because you have a habit does not make you an alcoholic. Okay. Alcoholism, like if you look in the DSM, alcohol use disorder is what people have when they develop a habit of drinking. Okay. alcoholism as a disease was an idea that was first introduced in like 1954 or 56, I think. And it was written in notes. It was the AMA, and I believe it was on a military base. Now, this has been a long time since I've done the research. I'm going to have to go look this up for you for the next episode. But it was written in notes back the first time that it had ever been documented back in 1956. Then it wasn't ever discussed or picked up or anything done with it until the late 1960s. And there were two cases in the Supreme Court. In one case, they won with this argument, and the other case, they did not. Okay. And so the argument was that if chronic alcohol use is a disease, then the person who hurt a person while they were drinking could get off by reason of insanity. Okay. And so then the other time it was thrown out. It did not work for them. So this is when it all really began. Like they were using it. Defense attorney was using it to his advantage. Okay. And then you fast forward a decade and a half, 2 decades to the Phil Donahue days and what have you. And then this is when it all of a sudden ramped back up again. And of course, even like rehabs, it classifies as a disorder, and that's how they have to code it for insurance. But it is not prove a disease. The very, very later stages can actually, once it's affected all of your other organs, then it can eventually, yes, it can kill you, and it can affect your brain and make your brain go to the point of no return where it's mush. Okay. But that is so far down the line that I can almost guarantee if you are functioning and you are getting up every day and brushing your teeth and going to work, and even that is questionable, but you are able to perform regular everyday functions. If you are this far into this podcast episode, like if you have the attention span to be able to pay attention to this, then this is not where you're at. You're not at the point of no return where you can't come back. I promise you that. Now, of course, you'll do all of your own research and take care of your own self to form your own opinion about this. Okay. Don't only go by what I say. Go Google, go do all of the research that you need to do for you. Okay. Please know that I am a life coach. That's what I'm qualified here in this world. I'm just sharing with you my experience, my knowledge from my past research and from my teachers and all of the things that I've collected over the 30 some years of being around all of this stuff. Okay. So just needed to put that disclaimer in. Probably should have led the episode with that, but that's okay. It's there. So this is very important to know. I don't know why this isn't really shared. It's like whatever people want to be publicized for their own good, for the making of money or whatever. But alcoholism is not a disease that is recognized by the DSM-5. Okay? Just going to put that out there because I firmly believe that fear-mongering someone or your own self into changing their ways or changing a habit will never, ever, ever be successful. Not for the long haul anyway. Like if you want true lasting change, then you have to do it in a way where first off, you know all of your information, but you're also doing it in a loving way with yourself. You can't get anything done when you shame yourself into doing it or scare yourself into doing it. No, because then you're only using willpower and that doesn't work. And we'll talk about that in the next episode. But alcohol use disorder is something that anybody can have. In fact, they test the lab rats. And so even lab rats, when they're given the little like drops of alcohol, will end up foregoing all their regular activity so that they can continue to drink. They will stop eating. They will stop drinking water. They will stop caring for their babies. They will stop playing. They will stop all of the normal things that rats would do just to get the alcohol because they, like us, have a reward system. What happens is we have the trigger and then we experience an urge or a craving. And so then we take the action of doing the thing, of consuming the alcohol, whatever. The dopamine hit comes. So we get the reward from it. And then your reward system is like, yes, this is how it's supposed to be. This feels good. And so then we reinforce the behavior. We need to keep doing it over. So our reward system is set up so that it thinks it needs to be receiving dopamine as much as possible. So it's going to also send a message, yes, get more of things like this. We're going to need to repeat the same behavior. And then it's just one big cycle, because there's the motivational triad. The human brain wants to do three things, and three things only. The habit part of the brain wants to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and be efficient. Those three things, those are the things that it thinks that it needs to do to keep you alive and keep you kicking. So whatever is not those things, your reward system deems as less important. So it needs to seek dopamine, and everything else needs to go away. So even in like situations where, like, let's say you're drinking and it's a habit, and that habit has not been doing well for you. You've been getting in trouble, you got DUIs, whatever is going on with you, right? Well, you would think people would say, oh, well, you should have quit. You should have already quit by now. Obviously, bad things are happening to you. Normal people would actually just quit right now. Well, guess what? If you have trained your brain, and if your brain is actually conditioned to act as it's supposed to, it's going to say, nope, we're still alive. We're going to keep going with what we know. So that is why so many people feel like such outcasts, and that how can I keep doing the same habit when I know it hurts me and I keep finding myself out of control? It's because you haven't learned how to interrupt the habit. Hear me getting all passionate about this? Because when I found this out, let me just tell you, I was like, eureka. Because then I realized, oh my gosh, this is just something I can learn how to overcome. Let me tell you, folks, it works. It's true. Once you learn how your brain works and that you don't have to give in to an urge, your life is changed forever. Okay. So it explains, it makes complete, perfect sense that you would be protecting your habit, right? Because it's what you've trained your brain to do. This is what your brain knows how to do best. So until you learn how to interrupt this habit, and you recruit your prefrontal cortex and start to interrupt the habit, and I'm going to explain that in the next episode, then it's going to be very hard for you to comprehend ever giving something like this up. Okay. So that is all I have for you today. I think that was probably a lot to digest, and I know it's a lot of your time. So I'm going to leave you with that, but then come back next week for the second half of this. If you guys, too, the holiday support group is still in action on Tuesday evenings. So message me wherever you get this podcast. Just look at the show notes. You can always send me a voice message. I think all of you guys are scared to do that because I get more Instagram messages and and emails than I do the voice message. It seems to me like I would want to do the voice message just because the button's right there, but you guys do how you want. That's fine. Okay. So that's all I have for you. And have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening today, guys. I am so elated that you've chosen to share your time with me. You can find me on Instagram at Beyond the High Road Coaching. You can also visit my website. If you liked what you heard today and you would like to hear more, please click subscribe so that you can be notified of new episodes. And thanks again, y'all. You are already in my heart. Till next time.